Well, welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. What we're going to start off by saying is that NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, served as the foundation for what was nicknamed the North American Union. In other words, out of NAFTA came the next step, which was the Security and Prosperity Partnership, nicknamed the North American Union. Now we are starting to see the same sort of thing in regard to other agreements under negotiation, that they will serve the same platform, only larger than the North American Union, into unions with Asia and unions with Europe, and equally as dangerous as the North American Union. Please bear with me to the end on this, because sometimes it gets a little bogged down into what some of these insiders say in their position papers and working papers out of universities. At any rate, if you listen carefully, these people tell you what they have in store for us. For instance, Henry Kissinger, in the Los Angeles Times of July 18th, 1993, said this: "It, meaning NAFTA, will represent the most creative step toward a new world order." Those are his words. Another quote: "It is not a conventional trade agreement, but the architecture of a new international system." Unquote. It is not a conventional trade agreement. And again, out of NAFTA, we tried to tell people before NAFTA was passed of what it would do to the United States, but people listened to Kissinger instead of us and Ross Perot and others, saying that there would be a giant sucking sound of jobs and industry out of the United States. That was one of the problems with NAFTA. The other problem was we knew it would be the foundation for even the next step, the North American Union. And out of it, again, they called it the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Partnership. Now, it's interesting that these new treaties that they're negotiating, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and the Transatlantic Investment and Trade Partnership, same vernacular, same thing. They are partnerships. In a word, a partnership is merger. That's really what it means. Now, again, they tell us what they have in store. For instance, if you go to an organization called the Center for Transatlantic Relations, it's run by a man, Daniel Hamilton, who's a member of the CFR. They have fellows who are part of this, who used to be the heads of Spain and Hungary and Ireland. They have fellows from all over Europe, including the European Union Parliament and that sort of thing. So this is not a lightweight organization. And in regard to the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, they have a working paper called The Geopolitics of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And this is what they say. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, being negotiated by the United States and the European Union, is far more than another trade agreement. Now, doesn't that sound like Henry Kissinger and what he said about NAFTA? See, they're very open. They put trade on the top of the paper, but when they talk about it to each other in these various articles, they say it's more than trade. It is, as the title implies, partnership. It is merger. Another thing that's happening in that regard, out of the Council on Foreign Relations magazine, Foreign Affairs, a few years ago, back in 2010, it said this: "Bigger is better." That's the title of this paper promoting the TTIP. Bigger is better. In government, ladies and gentlemen, bigger is never better. Bigger tends to become corrupt. And corruption, once government becomes total, it becomes completely corrupt. But government will always become corrupt the bigger it is. But here they're lauding the whole principle of it being bigger. And it's better, and it's not. It's totally the opposite. Interestingly enough, in one of the subsections in this article, this is the title of the subsection: "Resistance is futile." Say what? resistance is futile. In other words, this thing's going through, don't even bother trying to resist what's happening. You're going to lose your country, get used to it. That's the kind of the flavor of this thing. But there's things that are even more disturbing. You'll notice, for instance, that we got involved in Iran, and Iraq. We got involved in Afghanistan. We got involved in Libya. We're involved in the Syrian conflict. And why are we involved in those things? We are involved in them because we belong to NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, if you go online and look up that treaty, the preamble reaffirms its commitment to the UN. Article 1, Article 5, and Article 7 subordinates NATO to the United Nations. Very simple. And the thing is, in that regard, is why, if this is a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, why are we using that to get involved in North Africa or the Middle East or Afghanistan, etc.? Nobody is asking that question, at least not the American people. But then we start to see something else that's coming out of the Center for Transatlantic Relations, a little working paper here called The Transatlantic Pivot to Asia Towards New Trilateral Partnerships. Now, what they are talking about here is moving NATO into Asia. They're not satisfied with first being involved in Europe and then being involved in the Middle East. Now they want to move NATO into Asia. And that is very disturbing because NATO is the military arm that we have a treaty with, right? And that's under the treaty that we're fighting. It says here, the seeds of a globalized NATO have been sown. And they go through this thing and give you a litany of various reasons why NATO has been establishing liaison offices and that sort of thing in Asia, just like they've done in Moscow. But at any rate, let me read you a couple of things out of here. If NATO's leading power redefines its strategic priorities, European allies will no longer be able to stick to traditional interpretations of NATO's purview. Won't be able to look at NATO defending Europe from Russia anymore. Widespread Eurocentric preferences notwithstanding. Instead, they will have to broaden their security policy horizon to Asia as well. So they're talking about now not just Europe, not just the Middle East, not just Afghanistan, but also into Asia. They say things like NATO as a policy, as a partnership agency. A subtitle of this is NATO as a partnership agency. In other words, they're not satisfied with the idea that there'll be a trans-Pacific partnership, trade partnership. They're not satisfied that they're trying to get a transatlantic trade and investment partnership. Now they want to take a treaty that we've already committed to, that's already been ratified, and expand it unilaterally, without Congress, into Asia. This is very dangerous stuff. And so this is the sort of thing that goes through the minds of these individuals in relationship to what they're trying to do. And so we have to be very cognizant of this. And what does it mean to lose our sovereignty? What does it mean to lose our independence? What does it mean to become partners in these new organizations? What it means, ladies and gentlemen, is that you and I, as citizens of the United States, will no longer have any decision-making power relative to what we do. Those decisions will be made by regional aspects of the United Nations, called NATO, and other treaties that you can call them agreements, you can call them partnerships, you can call them anything you want, in the Atlantic and the Pacific, and tie down our military and our economic system and everything else into the votes of these other countries. They will decide what we do. We will not decide what we do. Majority rule in these things. And that is very dangerous for the future of the United States. These are not superficial issues. These are very urgent issues today that we have to be involved in, and take a look at them and understand why Washington and Jefferson and so many of the founders of this country said, stay away from foreign entanglements. It's going to be the death knell of the United States if we keep on this path. We cannot do it. Until next week, we'll see you then.